A very warm welcome to everyone for joining us today. For those who don't know, my name is Bertie. I'm the Managing Director and co-founder of Sampan Travel. We've been doing tours out here in Yangon, Myanmar for over 10 years, and more recently in Bangladesh and Northeast India. And of course, today we're going to be focusing on Northeast India, the Naga Hills in particular. As well as our tours, so we do small group specialized tours. We also continue to do our private bespoke tours in all three countries. But we've also begun doing these events. So today's talk is part of our speaker series, which happen in India, in Myanmar and Bangladesh, also in other parts of the world, including London, and online. Today, we have Charlotte Carty speaking to us. I know that some of you are familiar with Charlotte's story. Some of you have joined us out in the Naga Hills before. Some of you will be joining us next year, and some of you are thinking about it. And some might know nothing at all about this story, which is why you've joined us. So Charlotte is going to give a sort of an overview of the story of what 39 Hours to Kohima is, how this all came about, and indeed put it in its greater historical context. Just to give you a brief sort of outline of why we are here today. As you would have seen from the itinerary, Charlotte's grandfather was part of this historic but little known march from a small village called Jessami on the Burma-India border back to Kohima just before the pivotal Battle of Kohima in April 1944. It's probably about 2022 that Charlotte first got in touch with me and had the slightly mad idea that she wanted to recreate this march that her grandfather and his soldiers took 80 years to the second that he did. I was slightly alarmed at her request, but inspired by the challenge, and April 2024 saw Charlotte and her family and about 24 others embark on this amazing challenge of recreating this march that Charlotte's grandfather took with his British officers and his soldiers from the Northeast. Because it was so much fun, we did it again in 2025, and we're doing it again next year as well. It's become a yearly challenge. Charlotte has been with us both times we've done it. So as well as talking about the history today, she's also going to speak a little bit about the experience of having marched this 120 plus kilometer hike over the hills in 39 hours. So I'm going to hand over to Charlotte quite quickly. She's got about a 45-minute presentation, after which there will be time for questions, okay? And we do plan to end in just under an hour's time, so at about 1 p.m., 12 p.m., UK time. Do please put questions in the chat box at the end. Also, please do feel free to turn your cameras on, turn your mics on, and ask questions to Charlotte directly. Just to let you know, this we do want to put a version of this event up online on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. So just be aware of that if you are turning on your camera and asking a question. Okay. But please do get involved. It's an informal event, so please do chat away in that message box and ask any questions that you like. So Charlotte, I think if you're ready, I will hand over to you, and we can watch your presentation.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Bertie. And it's a real privilege to be invited on to the Sampan Speaker Series. Thank you so much. And yeah, to have a chance to chat to you about the 39-hour walk. I will try to do it in 45 minutes. I have been practicing to try and get it down in time. We may have to go at a bit of a gallop, so I'll do my best to keep to time. But, you know, what can I tell you about it? It really is a wonderful thing to do. It's definitely challenging. It is definitely challenging, but it's also very doable. We've set it up so that people can achieve it. We wanted that to be the case, and people can achieve it and enjoy doing it. And genuinely, whilst it is very challenging, it's a joyous thing to do. Really is joyous, a great adventure. So why did I come to do it? Bertie's given a little bit about background. It's all about my grandfather and his men of the Assam Regiment. So this is my grandfather, Lieutenant Colonel William Felix Brown. He was known as Bruno Brown to everybody. He left school in the UK at 19. Just as at the end of school, he moved out to India, at the time the undivided pre-independent India, and he went to Staff College in Quetta, which of course is now in Pakistan, and he was commissioned into the Punjabs, and he spent a lot of his career on the northwest frontier, running up and down the Khyber Pass, Waziristan and other areas as well. We've come to his story really in early 1941. Now, 1941, whilst there had been war in Europe for a number of years, the fighting in the Far East had not really begun. The Japanese had not bombed Pearl Harbor and started their advance, although they had been fighting China for some considerable time. So there was this feeling of a growing threat from the East. And in early 1941, there was a decision made to start a new regiment called the Assam Regiment. And the task of raising this was given to a Colonel Halman. His granddaughter is on the call today and has taken part in the walk as well. So Colonel Halman asked for some help in order to raise this regiment. And they got in touch with Major, as he was at the time, Brown, and he was at Citral on the northwest frontier at the time, and he jumped in a car and raced across to Assam, all the way across northern India, to help Colonel Halman raise this regiment, the new regiment. The Assam Regiment, whilst there were other units within the British Indian Army with the name Assam, the Assam was different because they recruited entirely from the tribes of the northeast. And so my grandfather made his way across to Shillong, and on the 15th of June 1941, the new Assam Regiment was raised. And as I said, they were raised from the tribal peoples of the northeast of India. And here are some lovely photographs, actually taken in 1938, so just before the raising of the regiment, just to show the tribal peoples who were living in this area at the time. This photograph was taken by an amazing woman called Ursula Graham Bauer. She was, in fact, a debutante, but she didn't fancy social life in London and took herself off instead to the remote northeast Indian hills and started work as an anthropologist. Ended up actually commanding a unit under Slim's 14th Army, but that's another story for another day. But these photographs are hers, taken in 1938, and they actually sit in the Pitt Rivers Museum in the UK. But you can see they're extremely fit, healthy, strong people. They were at the time giving up their headhunting talents. They had been converted to Christianity in 1880s, and some of their traditions they had to give up, including headhunting. But they also wanted to keep hold of as many of their other traditions as possible. And that continues to this day. The different tribes, they hold on to their own tribal traditions, and they have their own uniforms, their own costumes, their own dances, and they are extremely loyal, welcoming, fantastic crew. And thank goodness for the Nagas. Not only did the Nagas form part of the Assam Regiment, but they were incredibly helpful to the Allies throughout the Allied campaign, working to support the Allies and extremely loyal to them. And that actually happened with us when we were travelling out to Nagaland. They were so supportive of this remembrance walk, and without them, again, we couldn't have managed to have achieved it all. So they are a wonderful people, and it's lovely to spend some time with them. And these are the hills. These are the Naga Hills. Pictures taken in 2023. This particular picture, as we were sort of setting up for the walk. Jungle clad, lots of bamboo, insects and snakes. These are big hills, mainly hovering around 2,000 meters at the top, so not thankfully too high. So Oxygen is not going to be a challenge as such, but the oxygen is a challenge when you're having to try and go up and down these things. They're very steep, and in the river valleys, the rivers, particularly in monsoon season, are raging and deep and extremely fast flowing. So these are the sorts of conditions that the Naga people who were recruited into the Assam Regiment were used to. This is where they grew up. And it just so happened that the first parts of their operational activity was in the Naga Hills by chance, really. And that was extremely fortunate because they knew how to live in this terrain, which of course a lot of British soldiers who eventually came out from other parts of the world to support the campaign, they were not used to these conditions at all. But that helped the Assam, and as a result the Allies, enormously, that they were operating in areas that they knew. So in 1941, the Assam Regiment was raised. At the end of 1941, Colonel Halman was promoted. He was promoted out of the Assam Regiment back to headquarters at Delhi. He was furious. And this meant that my grandfather took over command at the beginning of 1942. Of course, around this very time, you'll know that Japan did or had bombed in early December 1941, had bombed Pearl Harbor, and they started their advance through the Far East, taking Singapore, swooping up through the Malay Peninsula, and then pushing the Burma army out of Burma to cut the Burma Road. One of their main objectives was to stop the Allies supplying China in China's fight against Japan. And they managed to push the Allies out of Burma, cut the Burma Road. And the next thing that they would have been encountering were these hills, these Naga Hills, a natural geographical barrier between India and Burma. And having reached their objective, having been exhausted themselves through the sheer speed of their success in early 1941, this is very much how the conditions stayed through the remaining part of 1942 and 1943. The Japanese were embedding themselves in Burma. The Allies were trying to work out what had happened and trying to retrain and regather themselves and deciding to try to make their way back into Burma at some point in the future. So there was this sort of moment of relative quiet in this area for about 18 months. What was the Assam Regiment doing during this time? Well, they actually saw in the rear guard of the 14th Army coming through Tamil back from Burma into India. They were working behind enemy lines, trying to find out exactly where the Japanese were. They prepared areas for the Chindit operations in 1943. So they were not exactly quiet, but they haven't been involved in any fighting. In 1944, early 1944, February, they were asked to go out to the hills of Nagaland, this barrier between Burma and India. And the idea was they were going to patrol and they were going to try and find out information about any Japanese movements in this area. Nothing was expected because these hills would stop a large force coming through. It was impossible for a large force to come through these hills, according to the High Command. And so they were really trying to find out information. They were a patrolling unit. And it was very useful, again, that the Assam Regiment were the ones chosen for this because a lot of the men were working in the areas that they had grown up and they knew the dialects of the different villages. Most of these villages would have different dialects. And so they were able to communicate with the locals and find out any information about the Japanese infiltrating through this part of the world. Interestingly, they were also given the order that if they were to encounter any Japanese, they were to fight to the last man and the last bullet. Now, this is an order that my grandfather actually questioned, thinking that the places where they'd been sent out to, this tiny village called Jessami, as well as two other even smaller satellite villages in the area called Fek and Karasom, he was saying that this wasn't necessarily the most strategic point to be trying to save with this tiny force, untested force. So surely if they were attacked, wouldn't it be sensible to withdraw back onto the civil administrative centre, which is Kohima, which was undefended at the time. The garrison commander thought that was a very good point. He couldn't change the order himself, but he would definitely go and inquire about it. So the Assam was sent out in February 1944 out to Jessami and Karasom and to Fek, and they were patrolling effectively. not expecting any Japanese to come through in any significant number to be a threat. But nobody had told the Japanese that. And in March 1944, they began their Operation Yugo. This was also titled the March on Delhi. So General Michiguchi threw 3 divisions across the Naga Hills. The idea was to travel lightly, move quickly, and to capture supplies from which they could then survive, live off. The idea was to take Imphal. Imphal was a major town on the plain, the Imphal Plain, very strategically important due to its airfields. So that was why they were aiming for Imphal. The other town they're aiming for is right at the top of the page, Dimapur. Dimapur was a massive Allied supply area, also at a railhead, also on the Brahmaputra Valley, on the other side of the Naga Hills. So if they could reach Dimapur, they would be able to resupply. The roads to Delhi, the trains to Delhi, the whole of India in many ways lay in front of them open if they could reach Dimapur. So that's what they were trying to do, sweeping through the hills to make their way to Dimapur. You will see here is the town of Kohima, the civil administrative centre for the Naga Hills. It wasn't particularly strategically important, perhaps sort of symbolic because it was the Naga Hills capital, but it does lie on the track. I say track, I will probably call it road, but at the time it was unmetalled. But it was the only route from India all the way through down into Burma, the one road stroke track that went through into Burma. And it went through, as I say, went through Imphal. And it is at this point that the saddle in the hills makes itself passable, and that's where Kohima sits. And so a very useful place to take, although in fact the Japanese probably could have and should have bypassed it. But thankfully for us, they decided to attack Kohima. What you can also see here out to the east is the village of Jessami marked on the maps. And just below it, another area called Somra, the Somra village. But in between, not marked on the map, is Karasom. Very briefly, I'm going to just mention Karasom. I always say I'll mention it because it's very important to me. You can see Sato's division, General Sato division, who was moving north through the Jessami tracks into Kohima and hopefully on. This force came across the Assam Regiment right in their way. I don't know who was more surprised, the Japanese or the Assam Regiment. But out at Karasom, my grandfather had sent a company of the Assam Regiment under the command of a young 27-year-old Argyll and Southern Highlander who had actually just been attached to the Assam Regiment. His name was Jock Young. Very quickly, because I know we're stuck on time. But Jock Young, he was surrounded there in the same way that Jessami becomes surrounded by Sato's 31st Division. And he was fought and delayed the Japanese army for 4 days at Karasom with his about 80 soldiers that he would have had around there. There was one company, but they were depleted. There were men on patrol. So we would probably say anywhere between 80 and 100 people held up one column of Sato's division. On the 4th morning, though, it became clear that yet more reinforcements were coming up the track, and he realised that despite this order to fight to the last man and the last bullet, which he had, and of course his communications had broken down because they'd been surrounded for 4 days, so he didn't have an opportunity to get new orders, he realised that it was just going to be a waste of life, and he ordered his men to go back to Kohima. But he said, following his orders to stay to the last man and the last bullet, he said he would be that last man and he would fight to his last bullet. And he did so, and he made that ultimate sacrifice. Such a brave young man. Now, my grandfather, so brave was he that my grandfather put him up for a VC. Sadly, due to military rules, he was not awarded a VC. In fact, he was not awarded anything because the rules mean that he has to have been, there has to be an eyewitness account from a senior officer. And as a result, obviously that was not possible. The senior officer was rather busy at Jessami defending. And so as a result, Jock Young received nothing. He lies in Kohima Cemetery, and I just always like to make sure that I mention him and his extraordinary sacrifice. But moving on to Jessami itself, this is what Jessami is today, what it looks like today. This is taken from the top of the hill, this photograph looking down onto the tracks which come from the east. We're looking sort of from the east to the west. The village is on the far side of this ridge line here, very steep ridge line with two rivers either side, about 700 meters below. And this is in fact the direction that the Japanese came into Jessami. And the local stories are that on that morning, it was a beautiful morning, the sun was shining, and it was glinting off the bayonets of the columns of Japanese as they marched along the tracks towards Kohima, and in their path lay Brown and his men. And this area just here, you can see the tracks coming down to this point, and they meet in this area here, and they go down that road, and it winds back down off into to Kohima on that side of the page. And this area here was where the battle took place, where my grandfather and his men held up the Japanese for 5 days and for 5 nights. And this is a map of the battle itself. This sort of center point is the actual perimeter, and the Naga village is further to the north off the screen at the top of the screen, and the command center where my grandfather would have been is this little block here, and this is what it looks like today. So this is the Jessami War Memorial that sits on the exact point of the command center in the middle of the perimeter at Jessami. It's a very good question. This is where we start our walk. This is where my grandfather would have been evacuating from 81 now, years ago. And this is where we start our walk each year at midnight. Now, his orders were, just like Jock Young's, to fight to the last man and the last bullet. So how is it he's withdrawing? It's another extraordinary story. I will, again, curtail it significantly. But when Jessami was surrounded, there were also Assam units out on patrol, and one of those units couldn't get back into the perimeter and ended up at another village called Fek, watching in, actually looking down on Jessami, trying to see what was going on. One of those soldiers from the Assam Regiment was a young lieutenant, 24-year-old lieutenant called John Corlett. And as they were waiting and watching, trying to work out how to help the people at Jessami, they received orders that they should withdraw onto Kohima. And Corlett asked whether Jessami had also received those orders, and the higher command said yes. They tried to drop a message to them by plane, and John Corlett had said, well, yes, we saw that plane, and it seems to have flown over the wrong area. It seems to have dropped any message on the Japanese rather than on Brown. And of course, they dropped the message in clear, realizing that the communications had probably broken down. So the Japanese knew that the orders to withdraw had been given, but my grandfather still didn't know. So Corlett, who'd seen this plane and seen that the order had probably not got through, asked permission to make his own way through enemy territory to try to get the message to Brown. And with extraordinary bravery and courage and a huge amount of luck as well, he made it through the night, past the Japanese, and he made it through the Assam perimeter, which was pretty touch and go for him too. And he managed to get the message to my grandfather. And so my grandfather, he was one of the last to evacuate, and he left at midnight on the night of the 1st of April into the morning of the 2nd of April. He left from this spot, and this is what we do each year as we are making our way. One of the extraordinary things about this area, being so remote and being such an unknown part of the battle, or part of the war, is that the area is still pretty virgin for war historians to go and find things. And this is Rob Lyman, who came out in 2024 on the first walk. He is just about to go in, I'm going to play the little video in a second, to see an old trench. This is a trench at Jessami overlooking the road that the Japanese would have been coming down. And here is Rob going to be entering into the trench with another one of our walkers, somebody who's also done it twice, by the way, who is a soldier himself.
Come on, we're over 80. Yeah, I was going to say, this is quite a...
just gives you an idea that if you kick around in the dirt in the area, you'll probably find bullet cases. It's exactly what happened to us the last couple of years. There is so much material. They found recently another helmet in the area, a Japanese helmet. So there's so much material still there to be found and discovered. And the people there are very keen for their stories to be heard. Whenever we go, we are so welcomed by all of the communities, and they are wanting to share their stories. So this year we were at a different village. This is Losafuhu, and we were greeted and warmly welcomed. And then this gentleman walked in. He's 92 years old, and his name is Hunenso Tseo. And he was desperate to tell us his story. I'm not sure that the council elders were expecting him to arrive, but he really wanted to tell his story. So he sat down and he explained what he was doing 80 years ago. He was a 12-year-old boy, and he remembered the British soldiers in the village, and the British and Indian soldiers, of course. Let's not forget that the Assam Regiment was 90% was Indian soldiers, Naga, men of the northeast. And there was also at this village a US air base as well for observation of the air. And he remembered he and his friends taking supplies up to the observation post and the Assam Regiment post from the village, walking up to the tops of the hills to deliver water and firewood. And he said we had great relations with the soldiers and they liked us very much, and they would say thank you to us with potato rotis, which I think is like a hash brown style thing, and also with cigarettes. And I said I was a bit alarmed to hear that the soldiers were giving 12-year-olds cigarettes. But he said, oh no, they were brilliant, he said. So people want to share their stories with us wherever we go. Lots of the villages we're travelling to have not had Western visitors for 80 years. So this is such a wonderful opportunity for us to share news, to tell their stories. And arriving into Jessami, again, another hugely warm welcome. Traditional costumes and stories and sharing news. It's a lovely thing to do. And I'll give a short clip of some of the dancing that we had to greet us on our first evening in Jessami. So the traditions are really cherished, and it's wonderful to see them and to share them. And as I say, we were just welcomed everywhere we went. It was marvellous. But of course, the morning of the 1st of April dawns, and we need to start getting ready for our walk, remembering what the Assam Regiment had done 81 years before. And here we have some of our extraordinary team. And it is such a huge teamwork exercise. Bertie mentioned about my getting in touch with Bertie to ask him whether he'd be able to put a walk like this together, and he rose to the challenge, and my goodness, he and his team are exceptional, extraordinary, and we couldn't do it without him and his marvellous team and all the guides on the ground. Again, the local Nagas once again helping us to actually make this happen. And here we have just some of our marvellous guides. We have Eddie and Zapu, who's our lead guide. We have Tseo, we have Keoje, and I should also say a huge thank you to Teja for all the photographs, by the way. These are his photographs that he has allowed me to use for this particular presentation. So a huge thank you. And this is the group that headed out in 2024 on the actual 80th anniversary. This was moments before we left. So on the morning of during the day, we tried to have quite a quiet day on that 1st of April. Most people have a chance to go to sleep in the afternoon, try to catch up on some sleep, put it into the bank before going sleepless for 2 nights. But at 11 o'clock, we sort of make those final preparations, and we gather for a final sort of meal just at about 11:30 before we make our way to the start point at the other end of the village. And the group had been quite noisy, quite rowdy, quite a fun group as we were celebrating 80 years since this moment, until this meal at about 11 o'clock, when sort of calm and nervousness perhaps descended upon us all, realising what lay ahead of us, and this is what lay ahead of us. This walk back from Jessami to Kohima. It's a 77 miles, 124 kilometres or so. It was longer this year in 2025. That's another story, due to rock falls and things. But following the main route, it's about 124 kilometres. There's an awful lot of ups and downs along the way. No two steps seem to be on a level. You're either going uphill or you're going downhill. You're walking through 2 nights because we replicate it to the hour, so we leave at midnight. And it's quite hot, it turned out, during the daytime. And so quite a challenge lay ahead of us. And here we are, counting down to midnight. This was in 2024, setting off on our first year's walk. I'm just going to see if I can put the sound on. Here we are, setting off quite into the unknown. We didn't really know if it was achievable or not. We were going to give it our best shot though. There we go. And we walked downhill to start with. It's marvellous. We walked downhill to the Lanya Bridge. This is the Lanya Bridge. And here, 80 years before, there was a massive Japanese ambush. The Lanya River at the time was chest deep in water, fast flowing, freezing water. And so it would have been preferable to go over the bridge. This is the exact bridge, a Bailey Bridge. Would have been what my grandfather and his men were trying to recross. But there was a massive ambush here and they had to fight their way through it. They had to fight their way through ambushes the entire route. So really, we had it easy. We thankfully didn't have to fight our way through here. We were walking along the bridge. We can't use the old Bailey Bridge anymore. We walk along the modern bridge. And what greeted us was Kevi and Creevy and our first checkpoint. So lovely. So the various checkpoints we set them up about every 10 kilometres, every 2 hours or so. It depends a little bit on the terrain because sometimes 2 hours of walking uphill doesn't get us quite as far as 10 kilometres. But there is an opportunity to stop, rest every about 2 hours. Teas, coffees, water refills, soups, food, snacks, bananas, apples, all sorts. The vehicles, our support vehicles, are with us the entire time. They sort of move from checkpoint to checkpoint. So if you do need anything from your bigger bags, you only need to carry what you need for the next 2 hours or so. So if you then need to either refill your water or go and get an extra coat or something, or get rid of a coat, fill up your, sort of put a new battery into your head torch or anything like that, the vehicles are always going to be at the checkpoints, which are never very far away. And everybody is on walkie-talkies anyway, so were we to have a bigger problem and need emergency help, then contact can be made and people can come and get to us very quickly indeed. So indeed, we were very lucky in comparison to the Assam Regiment. They did not have this sort of care and attention that Bertie has put in place all along the way. And you keep walking, you walk through the night and the dawn comes and it's wonderful and you're thinking, gosh, we've got through that. And isn't it lovely as we come through into the dawn and we're still smiling. This year in 2025, we were greeted for breakfast at the village of Feck. This is the Baptist church at Feck. As I mentioned, the American Baptists came and converted Nagaland to Christianity in the 1880s. And it's a feature of all villages, however remote, these enormous churches on the tops of these hills and razor-sharp hills, these enormous churches, you can see them from miles away, and they're filled they're filled with people. The community is extremely strong and extremely welcoming. And this is where we were hosted for breakfast this morning in 2025. The previous year, in 2024, Feck had also hosted us, but actually on our journey out to Kohima. And it was Easter Sunday, in fact, and they gave us a wonderful Easter lunch. And I just really put this photograph in to show you how whenever we arrive in the villages, the councillors will come and meet us. People are in their traditional costume, and they see it as a very important occasion for our being there and again sharing their stories of their experiences, the stories passed down to them from the elders in the past, and to ensure that these stories are heard once more. But onwards, after breakfast, onwards through the hills towards, marching east towards, west. Thankfully, I'm not finding the way. We have guides, otherwise we get lost. We're marching west towards Kohima from the east, and it gets warm. I don't believe that. I think the average temperature should be about 17, 18 degrees, but we had much, much hotter both years that we've done it. And here we are, walking after breakfast. I think this is even after our 11Z snack. It's wonderful. Eating becomes quite a big thing. Checkpoints become something one looks forward to. And here we are walking along the tracks towards our next checkpoint. Making our way through to Jessami, hoping to get to Jessami town around about lunchtime. And at Jessami, once again, we were welcomed, speeches, lots of shaking of hands, getting to know people, and sharing stories. In 2024, Jessami handed us this letter, a precious letter, and it had been written by a Canadian family to the village of Jessami, thanking the village for saving their father. Their father was a Canadian airman who had been shot down over the Naga Hills during the fighting, and it was the villagers of Jessami who rescued him and looked after him in the village, despite it being occupied by Japanese forces, so in great danger to themselves. They looked after this gentleman, this Canadian pilot, until it was safe to pass him back to the Allies. And it was a lovely thing that the family wrote a letter of thanks to the village, which the village wanted to share with the wider world. And then we keep on walking. Off we go again. Sometimes we're walking on bamboo bridges across rivers. Other times we're walking along roads in the sort of larger mountains as they wind up and down the valley sides. That actually is a photograph taken from a checkpoint. Down here, these tiny figures you might be able to see. That's me down there with some guides. Of course, I was bringing up the rear. I was the last ones. And we're coming up the hill here, but you can just sort of see us in the distance there. And of course, as you're walking on, the evening starts drawing in, it becomes cooler, which is extremely refreshing. And despite having now walked for a good many hours, so we walked through a night, through a whole day, we're coming to about sort of 5, 6 p.m. now, we're still smiling. And we are still smiling. I suppose recognizing that we've just walked through a whole day, so we've done a night and a day, and we are delighted with what we have managed to achieve so far. Moving on, now we are making our way towards Kohima. We're going to have supper in Kohima, and it's, of course, by now it's going to get dark. As we were coming in the first year, as we walked into Kohima, we were on a ridge and we were walking down into the village. Many of the other villages that you can see are up on the tops of the hills, and actually the roads don't always go up to meet them. The tracks do, but we were staying on the main road. The villagers often came down to greet us on the main road, but we didn't have to go up and down each of the hills to go and visit every single village. However, Kohima is on the actual road, on the track, and we were walking down towards it. And I realised there's beautiful sparkling lights in the village as we were coming down to it, but it was quite big. And I was thinking, oh, and it's dark. Do we know exactly where we're supposed to go in Kohima? I do hope we don't get lost and have to walk any further than is absolutely necessary, because I was getting quite tired by this point. And as I was thinking that, a group of youngsters came up, met us, and walked us into the village, took us, in fact, this time also to another Baptist church for our supper. And the elders there who met us, again, told us of their stories and their history, and they said that they wanted to replicate also what had happened 80 years ago in their village, and how 80 years ago to the day, to the hour, they had also had Assam Regiment soldiers coming into the village, and they had sent out their youngsters to go and find them and bring them in for food and water and opportunity to rest. Sadly, I was walking so slowly that I didn't have a long opportunity to rest here, but there is opportunity to rest at Kohima if you're fast enough. And Bertie is trying to make sure that that's now sort of set in stone for those who want to take a longer rest here. There's an opportunity to have a sleep and a snooze. I added this video in just to give you a little bit of an idea of what it's like walking in the dark with your head torch on in some of these tracks that we get to go down. Can't see an awful lot, but I'm hoping in the pool of light you can just see some of the elements of the track and what it's like. We're just about to cross a little wooden bridge across a stream, and then we're going to carry on down through the paddy fields. And you can see here, I'm hoping it will stop in a second. You can see just on the corner here, little lights of the village below, which is where we're actually aiming for as well. Just to give you a little idea of what it's like walking through the dark there. And then we've made it through the second night. Dawn comes quite early. It's normally about sort of 4:30, the light starts coming up. And we've made it through the second night. You know you're going to do it by this point. You might be totally exhausted, but you know you're going to do it. And so again, just smiles all around as we're greeting it. This is first breakfast. It's like hobbits. We're having our first breakfast here as sort of dawn breaks. And what I will also say is these warm, smiling faces at every checkpoint are extraordinary. We should also recognise that whilst the walkers, we talk about the walkers and getting very tired, we're walking along, all we have to do is put one foot in front of the other. Bertie and his team are also awake for 39 hours throughout this challenge, and they're the ones having to make decisions the whole time. Where to set up, is it okay, where is everybody, are the cars alright, have we got punctures? They are making decisions despite having no sleep, and yet they are still smiling as we trudge our way into these checkpoints. They are remarkable, and again, without them, it's such a team operation, and it's such joy to be part of it all, and so grateful for them all for their support. And as the sort of morning warms, you get to this marvellous milestone, 22 kilometres to go to Kohima. That's it. It's a really lovely thing. The first year when this photograph was taken, we knew we had about 124 kilometres to go. So this meant if there was only 22 left, we had beaten the 100-kilometre mark. Massive milestone. And I remember feeling elated for about 10 strides. And then my maths brain managed to kick in to work out that actually 22 kilometres is still quite a long way to go, and I happen to know that it was also a slow but a steady climb up from here to Kohima, our destination. So it is a massive moment. When you see the sign, it is a lovely thing to see. We walk along the side of the valley, working our way up towards Kohima, and this is where my grandfather in the Assam Regiment, they were strafed by RAF fire. And we reckon this is the valley which that would have happened. Basically, the RAF mistook the Assam Regiment for the Japanese advancing on Kohima. And so when they saw this column arriving towards Kohima, they swooped down and they strafed the Assam with fire. I just can imagine what my grandfather was thinking at that point. And so once we've got past the mark of 22 kilometres to go, there are still a few obstacles to make your way over, including the odd river as well. Thankfully, this year the water levels were sufficiently low that we could use the sort of stepping stones across the river. We can see down here, and there's somebody just about to make their way across. And the other very good thing about this particular water crossing is just behind where this photograph is taken is a restaurant with the best samosas on this planet. Sorry, there is no question about it. It's worth doing 39 hours just for those samosas. So there is a marvellous thing to be able to go through all sorts of terrain we cover, including river crossings as well, sometimes across the actual river itself. And then the final last mile or so into Kohima, uphill, sadly, steadily towards the town itself. Here you can just be able to make out, it says Kohima, 5 kilometres. Very exciting to see that as we make our way. And we're heading for the Kohima War Cemetery, right in the centre of the town, and where the the Commonwealth War Grave Cemetery is to this day. And we're greeted at Kohima by the youth organisation, and they basically park the traffic. The traffic in Kohima is exciting and challenging and busy. And they part the traffic and sort of walk us through the centre of the town. It's an amazing thing, sort of parting of the Red Sea almost as we're walking through the town safely to get. Otherwise, it's possibly the most dangerous part of the walk, but they make it safe by going through the town for us as we make our way to the Kohima War Grave, to the cemetery. And this is our destination. This is an aerial photograph of the Kohima cemetery. This is the road. This is the road I mentioned before that goes from India into Burma. It was the only road then, untarmacked, and there are other roads now, but it's still the most important route in and out of from India to Burma. So this line here goes along the Kohima Ridge and takes you off down to Imphal and to Burma, and then from the other direction around what they call traffic control point. This is the 2nd Division Memorial. You can just see at the bottom here, right at the tip. This goes along the valley side all the way down for about 35 miles, I think it is, down into Dimapur, through the hills onto the Brahmaputra Plain. This point was where the district commissioner for the Naga Hills, Sir Charles Pawsey, had his bungalow and was the centre of the fighting. These were his gardens. Where the cemetery now stands is the gardens, which were fought over. The Commonwealth War Graves Cemetery at Kohima is one of the few cemeteries which actually is on the ground of where the fighting took place. So the fighting was taking place all around this area. At the top of his gardens, there is a tennis court. We'll have a closer look at that in just a second. But this is where the tennis court sits. And this was the furthest point that the Japanese reached on their march into India. This is where it stopped. On the 3rd of April at 3 p.m, my grandfather made it in with his 260 men of the Assam Regiment and reported in to Garrison Hill, which is this top bit here, and to say that they had arrived. The Colonel Richards, who was the garrison commander, said it was the greatest sight of the entire war for him to see the Assam coming in. Kohima was undefended. The Assam Regiment were the only unit that was available to him. They had been fighting for 5 days and nights at this point, and then they had just marched 39 hours across 77 miles. And they were the only hope for the garrison at that point, is how Colonel Richard saw it. We should also remember that the Assam Regiment had not been involved in fighting before. Jessami and Karasom were their first ever battles. And here they were, apparently the saviours of Kohima. There were also the Assam Rifles, to about 200 men of the Assam Rifles, and there were what was known as odds and sods within the perimeter at this point. But there were about, at this time, at 3 p.m. On April the 3rd, about 1,000 soldiers facing the 31st Division were hot on the Assam heels, coming through the hills at them, about 15,000 men. And this was the ridge that they had to defend. Behind is India. Behind the camera is the east and the Japanese approaching this point. And the perimeter gradually, through the siege of Kohima that started the following day when the Japanese arrived on the 4th of April, and gradually the perimeter got smaller and smaller and smaller and shrank and shrank and shrank down to, at the end of the siege, it was this tiny area at the top of the gardens across the tennis court and a tiny patch of Garrison Hill, which lay between the Japanese and indeed potentially the whole of India. And the Assam Regiment fought through the entire siege of Kohima after all that they'd already endured. So we arrive in at 3 p.m. on the 3rd of April, and we're exhausted. Well, I am anyway. We are looking forward to good food, a shower, and a long sleep. The Assam Regiment arrived in and had to start digging in. And there was no equipment to dig in with. They had to dig in with their bare hands. And I just think that puts it into perspective as we arrive in and we're feeling exhausted, just to remember quite what level of determination and service these people gave. And as I said, the Assam Regiment were there they arrived the 3rd of April. The Battle of Kohima officially starts on the 4th of April. They weren't relieved until the 20th of April. The relief started on the 18th, but they actually couldn't get out until the 20th. And the battle itself continued until the 20th of June is the official end, the official end of the Battle of Kohima and Imphal. When they were relieved on the 20th of April, they had 48 hours in Dimapur to rest and refit. But because there were so few fighting men in the area, they were then brought back up again. I should also say, when they were defending during the siege, whilst they were in on the 3rd of April, thankfully, the Royal West Kents, 500 Royal West Kents were able to come in on the 5th of April. They were the last troops able to get into the perimeter. And without them, Kohima would have fallen. But vital to mention them too. And this is a video of our walk in 2024. I was very kindly told by a very kind gentleman about this particular app which tracks you as you're walking. And so I managed to put it on. I did it again this year, but it got too hot. My phone blew up. So it didn't give a complete guide, which is a shame because it was even longer and even more ups and downs. But this just gives you a picture of are wiggling up and down as we're walking through the Naga Hills in 2024. We followed a fairly similar route. It was a little bit different this year. As I say, there was a rockfall that made it further and faster, further and steeper. Sorry, not faster, but steeper. And as we make our way through the hills, trying to every now and then to try to remember to take a photograph to give an idea of the sort of terrain. And we're just making, you can just see in the top here also, it gives an idea of the altitudes that we're traveling on, the sort of ups and downs that we're facing. Now we're walking downhill. This is the first evening, the evening of the 2nd of April. We're walking down into the night. And then coming up to breakfast in the morning at the top of that little hill that you can see there. And then on, and we make it to Kohima, and the final climb up this valley. You're just about to see it entering into this valley towards Kohima. The long, steady climb to the penultimate checkpoints, where we know we've made it. We've just got to make those last few kilometres into the town itself, and opportunities to reflect on what we were able to do and what we were able to achieve, and into this town itself. And those are the figures at the top. On that day, or days, 125.4 kilometres. We did it in 36.6 hours, 36 hours and 6 minutes. That didn't include the last penultimate stop off. I stopped the recording. So we tried to make it as close to 39 hours. So we are arriving in at 3 p.m. to replicate when my grandfather got in. And you can also see that we covered 5,300 metres of ups and downs along the route. Oh, I remember, the first time I remember I've been practicing this. The next photograph, I'm going to explain it before I click onto it. In the first year, it was important to me that I was handing the torch of remembrance down on to the next generation. So I invited I told my 3 children that they were coming on the walk, and they very willingly volunteered and gave up their holiday time to come out and do the walk. They hadn't necessarily had as much time to practice because they're busy in their offices now as much, and so this was going to be quite an undertaking for them, and I think it was quite painful. An enjoyable thing to do, but it was quite a difficult thing to do too. At the end, my daughter eldest daughter decided to take a photograph of me just as we'd arrived in, because she thought it would be a good thing to remember. And then it got put into a slide, and Bertie insisted that the following slide came into this webinar. So I'm going to do it very briefly, but it's sort of a before and after photograph. Nothing really to see here, thank you. I will happily say that I hadn't had an opportunity to sleep before we started out. So I hadn't had any sleep for about 60 hours, and I was frankly just disgusting, covered in sweat and grime. But I love my daughter dearly still, honest I do. But here we are on the tennis court at Kohima, in the middle of the Commonwealth War Graves Cemetery. It's an incredibly moving place to be. It's beautiful, it's so well kept. The Naga people use it, a part of it. It's a living place still, which is so lovely to know that this, whilst it's a place of great reverence, it's actually very much in use today. And here, if you look carefully, you can just see the tennis court lines are marked out in white cement as a permanent reminder of the fighting that took place here across the tennis court. So the Japanese swept up to this side, the eastern side of the tennis court. The western side of the tennis court closest to the camera, they never made it across the tennis court. In fact, it was the Assam Regiment that were holding this side of the tennis court at the end of the siege of Kohima, just before they were relieved. They had been here for 5 days in the trenches on this side of the tennis court, making sure the Japanese did not cross. And this was the furthest point that the Japanese made it in their march on India. This is the point that the fighting in the Far East on land turned. No further did the Japanese get. The National Army Museum had a competition trying to determine what was the greatest battle in British military history. And Robert Lyman spoke in favour of the Battle of Kohima and Imphal being the greatest battle. And he won that debate. And so the National Army Museum has categorised the Battle of Imphal and Kohima as Britain's greatest battle, ahead of D-Day, Battle of Britain, Trafalgar, Waterloo. So few people know about it. But this is exactly where it happened. This was the turning point of the battle. here. And we're very fortunate. We are very lucky and have a lovely sleep on the night of the 3rd of April. And the 4th of April, we come back on the official beginning of the Battle of Kohima, and we have a service at the altar at the cemetery to remember those who were caught up in the fighting. And I've said it before, I'll say it again, it's all about teamwork. This is a team from 2025, our guides and the walkers. We couldn't do it. Everybody relies on one another, the walkers to get going, the guys to get us through, all the food. In fact, it doesn't have all of the people, all of the marvellous people helping in the background with the food. And we had an ambulance this year, thankfully you didn't need to use it. And you know, to everybody who's involved in making it happen, it's all about teamwork. I'm so grateful to everybody making it happen, making it such a joyous event. And a huge kudos goes to our brilliant guides, and I'm just going to hand over the next slide to our marvellous guides who are going to tell you a little bit about the walk from their point of view.
My name is Mr. Tejakile Yusabu from Nagaland.
Hello, my name is Eugene Chungre. I'm from Nagaland. I'm a tour guide and I work with Elder Tourism Travel Agency.
My name is Vicente Toiralu. You can call me Bubu. I work with Elder Tourism Travel.
It's been 5 years since I've been working as a guide.
4.5 years I've been in the guiding.
Around 7 years.
I'm a freshman, and the recent walk that happened on March was
Oh, sorry. Keep going.
my first experience to guiding.
39 hours to Kohima is special because it is a remembrance. Our forefathers have given themselves completely for our betterment for today.
It is a tribute to the valiant soldiers, Second World War, between the British and the Japanese.
The most challenging part about this 39 hours trek is we get to walk through all the Naga hills, bad roads, and the dusties and bumpy roads through the nights and days without sleeping.
We've been working for the whole 39 hours, so I should say it is challenging.
A family from the walkers, they were very tall, they were very fast. So each step, I had to take extra step to pace up with them. They had to take 1 step, and I had to take 2 steps.
Well, according to my point of view, someone should take this challenge, the 39 hours to Kohima, because it is very challenging. It is a remembrance of our forefathers, and we should take it up because we have lots to give for our society.
And let me go on to the last slide. I'm sorry, because I know I've gone too long. Oh, no, I don't want to go there. I want to go, but here we are. So hopefully these words will be something that resonate with you, something you've heard before. It's known as the Kohima epitaph. You might know it as the Kohima epitaph. It's of course linked to the Battle of Kohima, the one where, which was so key to the Allied victory, beginning the pushback into Burma of Slim's 14th Army. These are the words of John Maxwell Edmonds. When you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow, we gave our today. And so this call to action, this call to remember, and perhaps that's the main reason for doing the 39 hours walk. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. Very much. I think you've given a good, comprehensive, account of both the history of what your grandfather did and what you've been through for the last 2 years. So look, we have a couple of minutes left. If there are any questions, I know some have been coming through during Charlotte's talk, but if anyone does have any questions they would like to put to Charlotte, they can feel free to turn on their mic and ask away, or put something in the chat. If there aren't any questions, that's also okay. You're welcome to email us if anything does come up in the future. I know many of you were just joining because you're interested in the history, so I hope you found Charlotte's presentation today informative. There was always more to read and more to learn about this chapter of history. So if you would like our list of resources, we can share that with you, and you can continue learning about what happened at Jessami and what happened at Kohima. And of course, if you're keen to come to Nagaland, do let us know. You don't have to do the 39-hour walk. Me and my team are there often doing all sorts of things in Nagaland. So there are many ways to visit that part of India. But if you are keen to join and do the walk, then do let us know. We will be back there. Me and Charlotte will be there in April 2026. My colleague Eddie, maybe Eddie can say hello quickly. Eddie is from...
Hi, hello.
Hi, Eddie. Eddie's from Jessami itself, and he's part of our team in India. He'll be on the walk as well. So if you are keen to join us, do let us know, and we'll send you more information. And just finally from me, we are doing more speaker series events. So Miyayuma will keep you updated regarding those. I will be in London in October 17th. We've got an event at the Travellers Club in London, a dinner, and we've got two talkers coming along. One being Antonia Bolingbroke-Kent, who has travelled extensively in Nagaland, and she'll be talking about Nagaland today, about conservation and land rights, and looking at what this heritage is manifesting as in 2025. So we do have about half a dozen tickets left for that. So if you're keen to join us in person in London, do let me know, and we'll send you those details. But I think if there aren't, in terms of on YouTube, yes, please go ahead.
I was just going to say there was one question about the agriculture with the layered terracing, about whether that was man-made or geographical. I mean, obviously the mountains are very steep and ridged, but they use I believe they're ancient, but they are actually created by the Nagas, the paddy fields along the side for growing paddy. Again, Eddie, tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think it's agricultural, isn't it? It's irrigation. Yeah. Regarding on YouTube, Liz, yes, we are going to put an edited version of this presentation on YouTube. So we can try and email that to you if you'd like, but it will be up there in, let's say, a couple of weeks.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I think Erica might have some questions.
I think Ewan has a question. It's very confusing having an E. Monroe and an E. Monroe Ferguson, but I think Ewan's got his hand up.
Go ahead, Ewan.
Bertie, I'm not sure. I just wasn't thought it might be worth making the point. I don't know if it's still a possibility, but a point certainly from our experiences was that you don't have to do this as a solo experience. You can do it as a group and rotate through your vehicle. So I don't know if that's something that you want to mention, Bertie, but it was certainly, I think, I almost got the impression the first year there was an assumption that that's what most of us were going to do. And the fact that we all actually did the whole thing, I think, was possibly a surprise. But I just wonder if it might be worth making that.
Yes, thank you, and you're right. So, yeah, exactly. I mean, we had about, I think, 24 in the group and 19 who wanted to do the walk in 2024. I was expecting most people to sort of be jumping in and out of their cars and taking a rest and doing it as a relay. So I was quite alarmed, but actually I realized the vast majority, if not everyone, was actually very keen to try and complete the whole thing on foot. Because I thought this is going to be perhaps a lot more intense than I had imagined. But that is very much an option. Some people turn up because they're very determined to complete the challenge and do the whole thing on foot in 39 hours. But you really don't have to. The cars are always there. You can jump in your car for a couple of checkpoints, have a rest, and then start again. And of course, for those who get very tired, the cars are ready to take you back to Kohima, and you can join at the very end as we all walk in together. So the challenge is there for those who want the challenge. But like I say, it's supposed to be, it is an enjoyable and fun experience. So jumping in and out of the cars and completing it as a team is very much possible. All these details of the ins and outs of how we actually do the walk and how we arrange it and what's at each checkpoint and how we recommend training for it, we can of course send you. So do let us know if you're keen, and we can send you that information. Okay, thank you for you. That's a good point. I think we will stop there. Like I say, do please join us in London in October if you can, where Nagaland will be the subject again. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to Charlotte very much for putting all the time into her presentation. And we hope to see you again, perhaps online and perhaps in the Naga Hills. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.